All right, good evening, fight fans. This is the Psycho MMA fan. Big Mike coming back at you. I just finished watching UFC Long Island. It was a decent card. Shelby really put together some bouts that were really nice to watch. I just got finished watching the main event, Chris Weidman versus Calvin Gastelum. Chris Weidman secured a submission victory using an arm triangle. Chris Weidman is back on the winning track. His record is now 14-3. He did call out Michael Bisping for a fight. That is not likely to happen. Before I talk more about Chris Weidman and his victory, I do want to go over some of the other fights because, like I said, it was a pretty good card. The New York fighters did not win all of the fights, and I wasn't expecting them to win. But some of the notable wins: Jimmy Rivera beat Tomas Almeida. Me personally, I thought Rivera won by a large margin. He was just more of the technical, tighter fighter. Tomas is more of a display, highlight reel fighter, and that doesn't really work well against a tight fighter like Mr. Rivera, who is just so seasoned. He's so seasoned, and he's just such a good mixed martial artist, and his boxing is way up there. His mixed martial arts boxing, that is. There were some other fights here. I don't want to miss anything good. Oliveira beat LaFleur, flash uppercut knockout. It looked weird. Again, this is the second week in a row where I seen a weird knockout, and that just seems such a flash knockout that LaFleur needs to be checked out, or maybe he needs to check himself. Take that long look in the mirror to see if this is something that he wants to continue doing. This makes the fifth win in a row for Oliveira, and he's a welterweight now, so I'm not sure what's next for him. I'm not sure what this win really does for him. Again, there were quite a few good matches from the early prelims to the prelims to the main card. Very good fights. There was one fight that was a slugfest, Cummins versus Vellante. Vellante really had Cummins hurt bad in the first round, and then after that it seems like Vellante just went on cruise control, and Cummins was the fighter who wanted it more. Now, you wouldn't have thought that Cummins won from how his face looked at the end of the match, but some of that was due to a head bunt and blood being in his eyes. And again, the head bunt was accidental. Big John McCarthy gave him some time to clear his head. All right, and the co-main event was Bermudez versus Elkin. Elkin won by split. I thought he won just by watching the fight. Again, I'm not sure what this does for any of these fighters' careers. I mean, every fight you're trying to make an impression as to what's going to happen next. I will say this, though. This fight tells us a lot more about Dennis Bermudez than it does about Elkin. Dennis Bermudez seems to be on the way out. Okay, even though he was a faster, sharper, and what I thought was more well-rounded fighter, he could not bring down Elkins. And he's a wrestler. I mean, Bermudez is a wrestler. He could not bring down Elkins, and I'm not sure what that's about, but it seems like he's on his way out. And of course, the main event, Weidman wins. He's back on the winning track. The All-American from Long Island was the headline in his home city of Long Island. I thought that Weidman won every round up until when he submitted Calvin Gastelum. And this is where it gets tough for both Chris Weidman and Calvin Gastelum, and I'm going to tell you why. First, let's talk about the loser. Okay, Calvin Gastelum is really a welterweight, and while he has power to stun middleweight fighters like he did in this bout versus Chris Weidman, when he starts fighting the upper echelon of the division, like 5 to number 1 fighter, there's a big power drop off. And while he may be able to stun them, he is not really able to finish a middleweight. And this is where, being a welterweight and moving up a class simply because you don't want to stop eating really hurts you. Because I thought, and I said this in my picks, that I can't see a scenario where Chris Weidman loses this bout simply on the size difference. If you've seen them in the post-fight conference and the weigh-ins and the face-to-face, there's a significant weight difference. Chris Weidman is 6'2" against, I think he came in at 5'9", and Chris, being a natural middleweight, he usually puts on about 15 to 20 pounds between the time he weigh in and the time he fights. And so Gastelum is fighting against someone who is about 200 to 210 pounds, while Gastelum is fighting at about, 190, maybe 195 tops. So he's giving up lots of weight, lots of power. I'm not sure where he goes from here. He was ranked number 8 in the middleweight division. He's going to probably drop back to about 10, 11, and when he starts coming up, even against some of these mid-B level fighters, like let's say Uriah Hall, he is at a significant advantage because Uriah Hall is a striker. And I just don't see how Calvin Gastelum can even really win that type of match against a mid-B level fighter like a Uriah Hall. But I do want to talk about Chris Weidman before I send this video off into and attach it to the website. Chris Weidman is in a tough position here because he needed a win, and he needed a win any way that he can get it, and he got it. He was able to finish Calvin Gastelum, arm triangle. He tapped him. It's a victory. This is how Chris Weidman secured most of his victories before he KO'd Anderson Silva when Anderson Silva was playing around the first time that they met. All right, and so he's a submission artist. He's a grappler. He's a wrestler. He's a jiu-jitsu specialist. I mean, he's a huge 6'2". His walking around weight, everyone says, is about 220. So he is a big, muscle-bound wrestler. And, and again, he won. He needed this win. There's really nothing negative I can say about this fight. Chris Weidman did everything he was supposed to do to win. I thought that he's just a better fighter, period. In terms of strength, skills on the ground, and Kevin Gastelum, like I said, Kevin Gastelum didn't win not one round, okay, and he was just overwhelmed in every aspect of the game. I mean, yes, he definitely had a striking edge when it came to boxing. There was a point where Chris Weidman really tagged him, and he was able to move his head, and if Chris Weidman was just a little bit faster, he could have actually landed a knee or a shin right on Calvin Gastelum's head when he was doing all that bobbing and weaving to really get out of trouble. And he got out of trouble there. But where does Chris Weidman go from here? Again, I'm not sure. I don't see a good fight for him. Maybe Sosa. Maybe he sees what Luke Rockhold does in September. Luke Rockhold is fighting in September. He's headlining a card. I'll be talking more about that matchup later. Maybe Chris Weidman wants a rematch against Luke Rockhold. I think they both match up pretty good. I think that Luke Rockhold has a lot to prove in his upcoming bout in September. He's not fighting against a slouch. I did look up his opponent's record is 21-3. He's fought in the UFC about 10 years ago. Then he went off to fight in the World Series of Fighting, and now he's back fighting in the UFC for this bout. So there's a lot going on in the UFC, and I just don't know what's next for the All-American Chris Weidman. But he does secure a victory tonight against the welterweight Calvin Gastelum, and he needs another win. And his post-fight interview in the Octagon, he talked about people still not believing in him. Unfortunately, I am one of those people. This is the first win that Chris Weidman has managed to get that was against a contender since it was against a young and upcoming, or a contender that wasn't aging, because I told you this about Chris Weidman. Okay, he beat an aging Anderson Silva, and really, let's just talk about Anderson Silva playing around. Anderson Silva was actually very scared, and so he was trying to release some of that fear by playing around in the Octagon, and he got caught. And then we know what happened the second time. He went for a kick and shattered his leg, and then Chris Weidman went on to beat Machida, and then of course the Phenom Vito Belfort. He went on. All of these guys were in the twilight of their careers, and he was able to beat them. And the minute he got in with Luke Rockhold, I really thought that Chris Weidman would just steamroll Luke Rockhold. I'll be honest with you. He had me convinced that his grappling and his jiu-jitsu was way up there, and the fact that he was gassed after 3 rounds, and then of course, what's his name, Herb Dean, allowed him to get pummeled for the end of the 3rd round and the entire 4th round, where Luke Rockhold just got on top and just absolutely creamed him. Wow. That was a beating. And and naturally Chris took some time off, came back, received the knee of God, and then he also received another knee from Musasi that I still think to this day was an illegal knee. The referee says it's an illegal knee. It's an illegal knee, period. And just like Chris Weidman's coach said, you have these people in the media stopping it frame by frame, like Chris Weidman knew what was going on, and Masashi, no. The referee called it. It was an illegal knee, and Chris Weidman really came out at the wrong end of that. But he redeemed himself tonight with a submission win over the up-and-coming welterweight fighting in the middleweight division, Calvin Gastelum. So once again, this is the Psycho MMA fan, Big Mike, tuning off for the night. God bless and be well, and we'll be back in touch soon.